Welcome back to SIGA's Female Leadership in Sport Web Summit. Day 3, the final day, is fast coming to a close. We've got a super panel, though, to come in just a moment on technology in sport, and then the closing session as well. All of the panels are available on YouTube. Follow us, please, on social media as well. SIG Alliance. Don't be fooled. There's only one A. We're SIGA, but on social media, we're SIG Alliance on Twitter and Instagram as well. Use the hashtag SIGA Women and also Stand with SIGA. I've been asking you all day, a little bit self-centered on my part, to send a picture of you in your home office, preferably with a pet, only because I've got a golden doodle called Winnie myself, and it makes us all smile here and has done over the course of the last 3 days. And how about this? For all of the entries via social media, the best setup with a pet came live from Angela LaChica, or as I said earlier, Angela LaChicat. Her cat, whose name is Oban, after a whiskey, made a little appearance. She was unaware of it at the time, but it made us all giggle. Angela LaChicat. What an absolutely great moment. And it certainly made all of us laugh at the time. And you can see there that her jumper says future is female. Maybe it should say future is feline. So you've still got a little bit of time to input on this. It doesn't actually have to be with a pet. It can be with a child or just your home office if it's a nice little setup. But the whole point of it is to have some fun and also show us where in the world you are watching from. 50 countries and over 1,000 delegates represented so far. Meanwhile, on a more serious note, you can donate to SIGA. Please do that via the app or our website if you can spare the funds. Right, let's move on to our final panel. It's called Sport and Technology, Women at the Cutting Edge. This one will be one of the highlights of the 3 days so far. We're delighted to be joined by Katerina Ora, Associate General Counsel, Western Europe for Microsoft. Angela Reguero, one of the foremost voices in this field, is the CEO and co-founder of Sports Innovation Lab. Marilu McFarland is with us as well. She's the founder and CEO and chair emeritus of Women in Sports Tech. And Susan Warner completes this fascinating panel. She's the global head of talent and community at MasterCard and also the founder of Girls for Tech. We've got a super moderator as well. Really delighted to welcome Melissa Lawton, head of sports production at Facebook, based out of New York. Melissa, it's great that you can join us for this one. Really looking forward to the discussion. And with that, it is over to you.
Thanks very much, Ben. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all who are attending this session, Women at the Cutting Edge. As Ben mentioned, my name is Melissa Lawton and I'm the head of production at Facebook Sports. And I'm delighted to bring attention to this topic of female leadership in the sports technology industry. From a representation perspective, it seems a double whammy for women who follow a career in either of these spaces, sports or technology. And when these two very heavily male-dominated industries come together, it will eventually drive an industry value of $30 billion by 2034. So this is a space that women cannot afford to ignore. But the industry also cannot afford to block the growth of women. It needs to find a way to welcome a higher percentage of women at a leadership level who can sustain a long-term career growth in the merging of these two fields. So for this session, we bring together women who've reached the top of their game in big tech, legal affairs, and talent management, as well as two women who are breaking the mold as successful CEO entrepreneurs in the sports industry. We'll start the panel with individual introductions and then launch into this weighty subject. Susan, could you please start by introducing yourself and your impact at MasterCard?
Sure. So I'm Susan Warner. I head up global community engagement for MasterCard, and yes, the founder of Girls for Tech. So just a little bit of information about what we do. But first, I'm going to take you back to 2019. So it was the 61st minute of the World Cup finals against the Netherlands. Megan Rapinoe scored to put the US up 1-0, an amazing event, amazing feat. But was it a masterful blend of strength, timing, years and years of hard work and practice? Sure. But was it also a beautiful blend of speed, acceleration, rotation, and energy? It sure was. So when Naomi Osaka once again won the Australian Open against tennis great Serena Williams, was it her amazing backhand that did the trick? Sure. But it was also velocity, geometry, and aerodynamics at play. So one more, when you watch Simone Biles, the greatest gymnast of all time, in my opinion, do you think about the engineering or the engineers behind that sports equipment? The mat, the vault, the uneven bars. Technology is used to create the sports equipment, whether that's the uneven bars, golf balls, baseballs, basketballs, the ice ring, even a rugby prolate spheroid, that's football. Technology is used to monitor an athlete. As Magic Johnson once said, there's a lot of mathematical principles in an athlete's movement. And those stats behind my favorite baseball team, the ones that I quote only when they're winning, yeah, sure, that's data science. So like STEM in sports, there's a lot of STEM in payments technology. There's cryptology, algorithms, big data, digital convergence, cyber, artificial intelligence, and so much more. And that's why we created Girls for Tech 7 years ago, to inspire girls to pursue STEM careers and reduce the gender gap in these fields. The program is now in 14 languages, 40 countries, and we've reached more than 1 million girls and more to come. But 2 years ago, we created Girls for Tech in Sports as an extension of our Girls for Tech program. We started baseball and softball as a result of our partnership with Major League Baseball. Then we created a golf curriculum with our partners, the RNA. Then tennis and football came along, and pretty soon rugby. As part of this program, what we want to do is connect sports to cutting edge technology. So think about that golf swing for a second. Could it have the potential to function as an authenticating tool that says you are who you say you are? As more devices connect to the Internet of Things, and all of us own and use multiple devices on a daily basis, it's critical to authenticate that users are who they say they are. So passwords, what we're used to, even traditional biometrics like your thumbprint, it may not be strong enough soon. So that's where behavioral biometrics, like how an individual moves, how an individual types, swings a tennis racket, swings a golf club, it's all patterns that can be converted into a digital language. So behavioral biometrics, I think, definitely connects to sports technology, and there's so much more to come.
It's incredible. And it's incredible to hear the work that you're doing at MasterCard and with Girls for Tech. Katerina, you're at Microsoft, a true tech giant. Can you talk about your role there?
Thank you, Melissa. I'm Katarina. I'm heading the governmental and legal affairs team for Western Europe for Microsoft. And it's very hard to follow that from Susan, but I can tell that the artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, actually improving the performance of all teams and making people empowered to do what they want is really at the core of the company. I've spent 7 years at Microsoft and soon 4 years in this role. I can tell you that I'm here more to represent the technology rather than sports. So I'm really honored to be in this awesome group of athletes and people so closely connected with sports.
Wonderful. Angela, you're a 4-time Olympian and the CEO of Sports Innovation Labs. Can you please talk about your role and how you see women in sports tech evolving?
Yeah, thank you, Melissa. Yeah, Susan dropped the mic, laid out the tech is everywhere in sports. And as an athlete competing in 4 Olympics, I was always trying to use technology to understand my body to gain an advantage on the competition. As CEO and co-founder of Sports Innovation Lab, we're a market research company focused on the fan, the fan experience, really. And that's all driven through technology. The new way to engage this consumer is really understanding them, understanding their behaviors, and backing into the technologies that allow you to actually create those experiences. So that's what we study at Sports Innovation Lab. So I feel like, Melissa, I went from really understanding tech through the lens of the athlete and on the field and how important that is to evolve and show what's possible, to the business side of sports, where technology is everything today. We need to reach fans where they are, how they want, when they want, personalized. I mean, that is all tech enabled. And we sit at the intersection of that and try to make sense of that market on behalf of the entire sports industry. So it's a hot space. It's an interesting space. Women should be in the middle of that mix. They should be, yes, equally on the field, but equally on the business side, because we're consumers too. And at the end of the day, our wallets are just as green as the guys. And there's big money, big markets out there on the business side of sports.
I feel Mary Lou is going to take us home with her involvement with women in sports tech. Please, can you talk about yourself and that company?
Of course. Thank you so much. What a wonderful panel to be part of. And I love learning about what everyone's doing. So my own background has been in sports tech startups. I've been in a variety of leadership roles for the last 10 years or so. In fact, my first startup, I was able to meet Angela and the 2010 USA Olympic team in Vancouver, which was part of my startup called Vivo Girl Sports. So from there, I ended up in a variety of leadership roles in sports tech startups, mostly around athlete performance. And it was about 3.5 years ago when we sold the last startup that I was the CEO of, that I had been more and more aware that I was the only woman in the conversation for weeks on end. Yet I would work with employers and who were all white men at that point. And they really did truly want to find a way to diversify their workforces. And they didn't want to just be all white men sitting around the table agreeing with each other. So, and at the same time, I would meet young women who had been athletes, were sports fans, really did not know anything about this business of sports tech and the wide array and variety of career opportunities that are here. So we have created Women in Sports Tech. It was founded, we're a nonprofit founded about 3 years ago. And since then, there's an incredible movement of women and men working together. And our mission is to drive growth opportunities for women at all stages of their careers. So we have very specific initiatives, which I'm excited to share more with you, especially Susan, because we have launched a WISC Next Gen Ambassador program to introduce sports tech careers to middle and high school girls. We have a WISC Fellowship program, which offers summer internship grants for students to bring either their own self-created opportunity, which Sports Innovation Lab had 2 of our WISC fellows last year. Angela knows well how this program goes. And then we also have a new WISC network, which is a career hub that is the single source for employers and women at all stages of their careers to find job opportunities with employers who embrace not only diversity in their workforces, but also inclusive cultures. So this is a lot of the work that we do. We work with a number of accelerator programs so that we also support female founders, which is what I was, 10 years ago, not knowing that at that time, less than 1% of venture funding dollars went to female founders. But we really are working to see that change. So I'm just delighted to be here and can't wait to dig in and talk more about what are the categories of sports tech and wherever else our conversation takes us. So thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here.
So Mary Lou, we may as well start with that point of what is the growth? Where are we seeing growth? And Susan did talk about what constitutes sports tech, which is so broad when you boil it down. But where are you seeing in your position, the actual growth and the most interest from female applicants and from businesses?
Well, we define it very broadly. You can slice and dice it a number of ways. And Susan, you did a nice job of setting the stage for this. But at Women in Sports Tech, which we call WIST, we've divided the categories into athlete and sports performance, which is largely at this point around athlete recovery, athlete rehab, prehab and rehab for athletes to avoid injury, team and coach success, fan engagement, which includes venue and event innovation. Digital media opportunities abound. Fantasy sports and betting. Esports is growing like crazy to the point that it's likely to become an NCAA sport within the short term. And then also just the business of sports. What are the technologies that teams and leagues use in the front office and in the back office in terms of recruiting, scouting, optimizing what they're doing with their fans. We define it very, very broadly. And if you think about it, every role in sports, in the sports business at this point does require significant comfort and knowledge and savvy around technology. If you're going to be innovative, you're going to have to be comfortable and embrace the new technologies that are available. So we have a very big tent here. We try and offer and support women at all stages of their careers, no matter what their own brain lead is and what it is that they would like to be doing in business. And that's a big part of what we do by introducing these careers at even earlier stages for girls so that they continue their STEM studies and their participation in sports. We do know that teenage girls are not encouraged really for either one of those things, but as much as we can show role models, that's really what we're all about, because sometimes it just takes, you know, we say see it to be it. It can just take that one role model or that one interaction with a mentor that can absolutely change your trajectory and what your dreams are that you can do with yourself and with your life and with your career.
I might roll back to the idea of getting started in a bit, but Angela, I want to focus on a little hurdle, implicit bias. You know, less than 2% of VC funding goes to women. And is that because VCs still believe women just don't have the passion for sport or don't care enough about technology? Or is it because that VCs in general across the board focus less on women in technology? Or is there also a pitch gap, like not enough people coming and pitching not enough women coming and pitching their ideas so that they can have access to some of that VC funding? Do you have a perspective on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you look at the numbers today, 25% of founders are women. You mentioned the 2-3%, you know, not anywhere close to the percentage of actual female founders get funding. It's even worse for Black and Latino women. You know, yet there's been, you know, studies that we've looked at. Women's founded startups generate 78% for every dollar invested compared to 31% for men founded companies. So clearly women, if they're invested in, are more successful than male founded. You mentioned implicit bias. I definitely think that's one of the main reasons. I mean, implicit bias, if you boil it down, it's you hire people, you invest in people, you surround yourself with individuals that look and feel like you because we're comfortable with that. We feel a sense we know them. I mean, I do it. I have to really recognize, like, oh, they went to my school. Suddenly you feel like you know them more, but you really don't. They just went to your school, or whatever the case may be. So I think implicit bias definitely inhibits the amount of investment in female-led founders in sports and sports tech specifically. And how do you get around that? You definitely need more women pitching. To Mary Lou's point, if you can see it, you can beat it. You need more female founders that are leading companies out there in the public to spur on young women saying, I should build a company around tech and sports technology. But if you understand the hurdles, you know, you can understand why a lot of women are like, 2% go to me. It's, you know, it's not encouraging. So I'm very big on, like, let's be aware of the situation, the bias, the hurdles, and try to formulate strategies to get around that. You know, certainly I started a company. I have a co-founder that's male. We work extremely well together, but I understand, you know, that there are hurdles to being a woman. I walk in a room, I'm usually the only woman in the room. And I wonder what comes with that. Do they see me as a woman or a kick-ass CEO at the end of the day? Do they view me like their peers, their male peers, or do they see my gender? And as an athlete, a female hockey player, I faced this bias growing up. I was the only girl on the ice. I got cut from teams because I was a girl. I mean, I've been there, done that. Now I'm in the professional world. So I recognize that, look, there are strategies, support teams, other vehicles to get to where you need to go. You got to kind of understand there is bias in the system. And it's about these kinds of conversations, I think, that bring awareness to those that have power, but also hopefully empower women to say, hey, you can do it. Like, don't give up. Maybe the path's a little bumpier, but you got to stay true to who you are. And, you know, I would just encourage any young woman listening or any woman listening, like, don't let this get in your way of building your own company or going hard after the sports technology space.
Totally agree with you there. Like, Katerina, how do we get closer to closing this gap? You're in big tech, and I've seen myself systematic approaches to make sure that we're keeping or trying to keep the door open. How do you see sports adopting technology approaches to closing the gap of women working in sports and technology?
Thanks, Melissa. I think actually sort of following these perspectives from the other panelists is a very eye-opening sort of moment. And I think there's a lot of similarities between, you know, the path or the journey ongoing in tech and as compared with that ongoing in sports. And just speaking up about the sort of biases, whether they are conscious or unconscious, is a good start. And it's actually not probably surprising that in tech industry, this sort of work towards more equal and sort of diverse workplace has been ongoing for years. And for instance, in Microsoft, we started issuing these sort of diversity and inclusion reports already in 2014, when it wasn't that sort of popular or the mainstream action as it is now. Just to you know, the external pressure, but also an internal interest to follow up on your commitments is key. So actually doing systematic work all up. And in our case, for instance, it's obviously starting with recruitment, looking at sort of sources for talent, not necessarily all the traditional one, but very systematically going for talent pools a little bit outside the standard form. You know, making sure that we actually support programs that ensure that, you know, gender balance would also start in the time of studies, and even in the sort of elementary school time, when, you know, the choices are made that will define what studies you can do a little bit later on. We have systematically supported that work across the globe, which is really laying the foundation for having that pool, talent pool, the more sort of gender balanced talent pool later on is key. And these are the sort of perhaps sort of higher level, very clear and visible actions that can be taken systematically. But on top of that, actually, we do a lot of sort of smaller things, internal things, not that visible outside. We actually, for instance, in our sort of department or function, every single time there's a, you know, recruitment happening, we have a call with the leader of the function, or leader of our sort of part of the function, called a diversity and inclusion call. So the hiring manager has a 15-30 minute call with the function lead, and we discuss the diversity of the candidates that we are justified to make the offer to. Just to be, that doesn't mean that we always hire women, for instance, obviously not, but it makes the hiring manager more aware of the choices. You know, has he or she actually sort of looked for all the possible good candidates? Has he or she actually sort of thought about the balance in terms of diversity in the team, and doing the little sort of choices when you are doing the recruitment, and being actually able to basically give the rationale why this particular candidate. And we also have introduced diversity champions into the teams. We have frequent meetings, etc. Of course, we all know that diversity and is not just about the gender. It's all sorts of other things. It's ethnic backgrounds. It's also your personality. It has to do with your language skills, and whether you're a native speaker in the sort of you know, dominant language in your working place, etc. All sorts of other things. That is really key. That we sort of from the grassroots level up to the sort of most senior leadership actually sort of are very conscious and make, you know, years and years of effort actually towards more diverse and inclusive working environment. So that's clearly something, and it sort of certainly applies to all industries, not just tech.
Yeah, again, I think it's really important to understand that idea of having someone as part of a loop to give them the opportunity is an important part of a recruitment strategy for companies now. But Susan, there's that idea that a woman's in a loop, but how do we get the girl to want to be a part of that loop and apply for that job? And I think it's some of what you're doing at Girls for Tech. Can you talk more about that, creating the interest from the girl to the woman who's going to lead parts of this industry one day?
Oh, sure. And I would quote Mary Lou, you got to see it to be it. And I will tell you that there is not a girl in the world that walks, excuse me, that walks into our building saying, I want to be a fraud detective, but they do on the way out because they've now been exposed and experienced an activity that makes them think differently, or maybe think about it something for the first time that they hadn't before in their life. So, and I agree with Katerina. I start early and often, motivate early and often. Parents, teachers, community leaders, we can all play a huge role in motivating and creating opportunities for students. And companies and their employees, we can't forget them because they're the best. They can play a huge role as role models and mentors. We can showcase the STEM in sports so that girls can see what appears to be two very disconnected areas of interest that actually connect so beautifully. You know, what better way to get their attention than to focus on something that they love and they're exercising and they care about? Well, sneak in that learning on cryptology, biometrics, and fraud detection. While they're doing, I call it sneaky learning. It's learning while having fun. I think sports companies can take a page, they can play a role by creating programs that showcase their STEM opportunities, not just talk about them, but actually show what a real life sports technologist does, and then make them sports technologists as well and solve real world, bringing them to life. So I think engaging students in their communities, especially underserved communities at an early age, it's just critical. Opportunity and access that's what's going to level the playing field.
Agree. I mean, opportunity, and I'd also agree with that idea that sports at some point they have to show the connection themselves, and if they're bringing young women into the fandom space, they also need to bring them into that idea of all the things that go behind that fandom. We have a question about artificial intelligence, and let me just go and bring up the person who's asking the question. From Becca Brown, Senior Manager of Business Operations and External Affairs from the Dallas Mavericks in the US. Artificial intelligence is emerging. Do any of you have any experiences or perspectives around how this could impact sports? Mary Lou.
I could speak to a product that's used in baseball currently. And for the last year or so, I was working with a company called Mustard. And it is, we have taken 40 years of data by Tom House, who's coached all the top MLB pitchers as well as NFL quarterbacks. And I was helping them with their naming and their branding, but they have used artificial intelligence to take this 40 years of data on biomechanics in the pitching motion to be able to do in a mobile app for free, any pitcher, any young pitcher anywhere in the world. So this democratizes access to this amazing elite level coaching, to where 11 different variables are measured when a young pitcher pitches, and they get a report card back based on the artificial intelligence, the data based on Nolan Ryan, Randy Johnson, the best who've ever played the game. And that returns then also drills for how they can improve. So what I've seen on the athlete performance side is in home court AI, there are a number of them now that are able to really fine tune an athlete's biomechanics to avoid injury. Oftentimes it's those marginal gains that you can learn back from this that can make the difference in, you know, reaching your potential or not, or being injured or not. So artificial intelligence it's important to note too, is only as good as the data that goes into it. And I think oftentimes IBM Sports is a big partner of ours, and with Watson, they do a lot of work to make sure that the people creating the technology for this AI that Watson uses, they are diverse in themselves as well, because there can be bias even built into artificial intelligence, as I think most of us know at this point. So it's fascinating. It's definitely an emerging and an exploding area of sports tech for sure.
Yeah, I could, sorry, just to jump off of that, you think about artificial intelligence, absolutely on the field, that's the money ball, using technology and analytics to better predict performance and prevent injury. I think about it through the lens of the fan, because if you can actually understand your core consumer better, which is a core question this entire industry needs to answer, through AI, you can better personalize those experiences. You can better using AI, you can deliver a better fan journey, both before, during, and after, at home, in the venue. So I think AI is absolutely on the cutting edge of what we should all understand as an industry, because as consumers get more sophisticated and this industry really leans into technology, and you're at the Mavs, like, you get it, you got an owner that's leaning in, those properties that really understand AI and the technologies that can deliver that without bias, to Marilou's point, I think we'll really capture that. We call it a fluid fan here at Sports Innovation Lab, that next generation consumer. So it's a must-have, in my opinion, if you're gonna, one of the few technologies I'd say, understand in this space.
Yeah, I would actually sort of want to follow that up and say that, for instance, Microsoft is offering a lot of solutions also for sports, especially utilizing artificial intelligence and building on that kind of experiences and improving performances for the athletes themselves. But this brings a topic that is not fully on our agenda today, but this is a very important call out, which is ethical rules and how you utilize this AI data that you actually gather, and while it's sort of improving the world in many ways, we also need to be very responsible when we actually utilize it for exactly eliminating bias and sort of trying to actually sort of use it in a way that improves the quality of life for everybody.
Melissa, can I add one point to that? Just that topic, that question alone to me elicits the opportunity for women in sports tech. If you fully understand AI, just as one example, there are very few people that understand the technology of AI and its application to sport. Therein lies the opportunity. And I think with COVID, with the rules of sports being rewritten, I'm very encouraged and bullish and supporting women through our Women's Leadership Board and other initiatives. This is the opportunity for women right now. If you understand tech and you can put that and deploy it into sports, I think there's a massive opportunity. And there's a lot of men, a lot of women don't understand this tech. So if you can wrap your head around it and really understand its context for sports applications, I think COVID's actually created a really amazing opportunity to leapfrog maybe decades of bias that has existed in the sports industry. So I would just encourage women, like this great question we had, if you know AI, like, you can get ahead in the market today. Sorry to jump back in. This is the moment for women in sports tech.
It is. And it's that idea of like leveling the playing field is super important, because I mean, those who are writing the rules for AI, making sure that is a diverse set of people with a diverse background and diverse ways of thinking is important for the success of AI in the long term, as Katerina said. But let's talk level playing fields. I know, Susan, that there's not a level playing field in most STEM fields, and payments is another one of them. Why is that a concern for MasterCard, and how does that relate back to sports in general, and why do we feel like we need a female representation at an equal level in that field?
Oh, sure. It's gender balance is a challenge for every business throughout the world. Yet women are not a minority. We represent half the human race, and yet we continue to be underrepresented, especially in STEM fields. 1 in 5 boys will pursue STEM versus 1 in 20 girls. That's a problem. That's why we're in this space. So at MasterCard, I'd say we believe achieving that gender balance, especially in a technology company, it's the right thing to do. It's a decent thing to do. And here's why: because 85% of the buying decisions are made by women. They're extremely vital to our business. I should say we are extremely vital to our business. And we also know that 50-50 representation, when you're building a new product or creating a new service, by having the diverse thought in the room, we're going to create better product, services, and better technology just automatically. That's why we're just tackling this problem head on. We just really feel strongly that girls need to learn about the variety of STEM careers that are out there. Again, connect it with something they love, have a lot of fun. That exposure, the opportunity access is critical. And once again, say that, you know, the more they can see it, the more likely they can do it, and put it out there as, I'm going to be this, because they've now know about it. It's in their lexicon. So that's what we think in this space. It's 50-50 all the way.
I mean, that 50-50 thing I've heard on more than one occasion, that sports benefit from having 50-50 leadership because they do appeal to 50% of the population. Mary Lou, do you have any companies that you're looking at who are trying to write that and dive into that sort of sports and commerce side of the field?
Very much so. One that comes to mind, well, Comcast NBCU is making a huge effort towards this. They have a Comcast Sports Tech Accelerator program, and we're so delighted to be working with them. 40% of their cohort that they've just brought into this program are female founders or have a female on their founding team. So yes, and then there are businesses like Dick's Game Changer that recognizes, you know, they're a fast-growing, really the baseball youth sports stats streaming app that's available today, and they are making specific, you know, statements, specific stated initiatives to diversify their, not only their workforce but their leadership roles, right? Because you know, to see it, to be a young woman who's going to be attracted to your business, they need to see women in leadership roles so that they see a path to themselves growing within that organization. So I think the other important thing to note is you can't just, employers today recognize you can't just add one person to your leadership team or one person of color and think that you're diverse or you can check that box, because the reality is being the lonely only is no fun for anyone. You know, I heard that called that recently, and I've been that. We've all been that, right? I played sports with boys when I coached my daughters when they were young in soccer for 10 years. I was the only mother who coached, yet I tried to bring others along with me. So sometimes it just also takes having courage by the employee to just recognize, okay, the company's trying. So one thing that it's important to note, I think too, is the employers that we are working with at WIST are very intentionally looking for to diversify their hiring talent pipeline. But it's also incumbent upon women and people of color in these organizations to bring in their own network, because that's how it happens, right? When roles are posted, it's up to me to bring my own network so that there are other people with lived experiences that are either similar to mine or at least different from what the rest of the leadership team is represented. So I feel very optimistic. I think we see employers and work with them every day who really are enlightened on this, and they recognize the business results can be much more, successful if you don't just have the same, lived experiences sitting around the table. And to your point, Susan, and especially in the United States, half of the athletes in this country, thanks to Title IX, are women and they're sports fans. So it just makes sense as you're building a product that is going to be consumed by a diverse, consumer group, or even B2B, it's important that you have people who represent that diversity, who are building the technologies for this consumer base.
I have a question from Sharifa Wilkinson from the sports management lecturer at St Mary's University, London. She'd like to encourage students, especially females, to start thinking more innovatively about sports and tech. What would you recommend introducing into a classroom?
Well, I could bring my food fan research if you want to give me a call. We see the new age consumer as the growth path to the industry. The industry, in my opinion, has been very focused on traditional revenue streams, ticket sales, linear media rights, sponsorship sales, and maybe merch and food and beverage. And in our opinion, the growth is these more fluid new age consumers that are digitally savvy, that are on Facebook, Melissa, that are using Microsoft's, play-by-play on the bench, that are using your cashless, Susan. I mean, the new age consumer is the growth path of the industry. And I would recommend any studies, any universities that are actually trying to teach the next generation student that's going to become that leader, to understand that we are moving from a analog events business. I've heard a lot to a media platform, but I would say push it one step further and think of sports as just another data platform. And if you can really understand sports as a data ecosystem, connect those dots, that's the growth of this industry and the sophisticated student. Again, females, this is our opportunity. You understand technology, you understand this fluid fan. I think you can leapfrog your competitive advantage in getting those first jobs, in going into the right positions that, again, align with the growth path of the industry. So I would just push your university to make sure they're teaching this. And if they're not talking about big data, if they're not talking about technology, if they're not talking about, again, this panel, and they're talking about just the same model, you might be in the wrong university. So I'm not giving you I'm just saying, make sure your professors really are pushing on the future of sport.
Susan, did you have anything to add there? Given
Well, yeah, I would go just to the, let's say, the elementary or the primary student. Think about the activities that you can show your students, the STEM in sports. Go to a basketball court and talk about geometry. Talk about behavioral biometrics and how patterns and digital language can be talked about. Talk about data science and big data and how they connect. Have fun with baseball stats. Like, there's so many, you could Google so many sports and STEM activities. I think it's just bringing real life challenges, opportunities, bring them into the classroom, make it come to life. I wish I had thought about pool when I was in geometry class. I might have done a little bit better, but I think about it now. I spend half my time living in the world of stats. So I wish I had done a little bit more better in that math class. But that's how you just have to connect what you're studying with a wee bit of fun, but make the worlds collide, and then it connects in everyone's head. So I think have fun by engaging activities with and really showing that these exist.
We have another question from Marsha Boyce, communications consultant with the Caribbean Regional Anti-Doping Agency. Does sports performance analytics tailor for gender difference? Is this an area that needs further development?
I could probably jump in. There are several, that's a great question. There are several sports tech businesses that I'm aware of that are finally recognizing how very different the female body is from the male body. And the training to date, until recent years, has very much just been generic to all bodies. There's an organization called wild.ai led by Helene Guillaume that I would encourage everyone to check out. And it's she's being wildly embraced by NCAA programs, by professional organizations, because there is, the periodization of training is certainly now kind of commonplace. But what we haven't taken into account yet are things about the female body during certain times of the month, ACL tears and injuries. I think that is an amazing frontier that I truly hope, for the sake of all women athletes, that we do pay, that there is more technology, more AI applied to that. What led to, here's a good example. My daughter Darcy played on the UNC women's soccer team, which you all may know of, and they were undefeated in the country until one weekend on a field, on an away weekend. They had 4 midfielders, 2 on Thursday, 2 on Sunday, tear their ACLs. So at what point would artificial intelligence maybe have predicted something was going on there that was specific to female bodies? So I think it's a fascinating question, and definitely one that is finally kind of seeing its place.
We have a lot of questions coming in now, and it looks like we're running out of time, but Kate Simmons, the Global Chief Operating Officer at SIGA, is asking, what are the recent innovations in sports technology that advance integrity on the field? Because obviously with this conference, SIGA is interested in promoting sports technology in the field of sports integrity. Susan, is that something that you'd want to jump in on?
I think I'm a little out of my league there on that question. I'm not sure I can answer that.
I mean, I guess I could jump in if you want. There's companies like Sport Radar and others that are, you know, as sports betting in particular is hitting North American market, we know it's in the European market. This is a hot space because, again, there's, I sat on the IOC, I was on the executive board and had several of these conversations. While it may not affect the most elite athletes, there is always a risk with sports betting in particular, that athletes might throw games, might throw a shot, et cetera, et cetera. So I do think from the integrity perspective, if you're just talking through the lens of sports betting and the professionalization of women's sports as well, there's a need in the market. So it's great, you know, that this group is studying that, is thinking about that, is setting up these kinds of conversations, because with success, you know, there comes risk. And I think there are companies, again, out there that are using technology to hopefully identify where, you know, improprieties happen.
We have a question from Charmaine Kubier-Nondo, Managing Director of the Global Sports Support. And she has an interesting one, again, just a minute. So if we could answer this one as quickly as possible. How do we ensure that sports tech products are relevant in third world and first world countries? And I'm wondering if Microsoft would be the one who could answer that. Like Wi-Fi in third world countries, difficult, sometimes connectivity, massively difficult. How do we make sure that we're on a level playing field across the board?
Because there's a lot to do still, but you know, for instance, for our company, we design products with you know, different use scenarios in mind, and actually, as it happens, we have also been offering EBAN program as a solution for the connectivity for, you know, underserved you know, locations, and even within our own continent, there are some places where it's hard to actually sort of put the broadband in a sort of traditional sense. So you can utilize various technologies to actually fill that gap as well.
We have 30 seconds left to go, and I just really want to say thank you to the amazing women on this panel. It's just inspiring for me to see people have reached the top of their field, and to be a woman and to be in sports and tech, because we know it's difficult. And thank you to SIGA for bringing us all together.
A very good evening to you, and thank you to Melissa and the panel for that last fascinating discussion on technology, I should say, in sports. It will be available on YouTube over the course of the coming days, and also some clips on social media at the end of every day. We publish highlights from the day, so if you've missed any of the action, please check us out on Twitter at SIG Alliance. So we are SIGA, Sport Integrity Global Alliance, but our social handle is SIG Alliance to avoid you having to press A 2 times. Now, if you can donate, that would be much appreciated. And we are coming to the close of our wonderful, enthralling Female Leadership in Sport Web Summit. And to do that, if you like what you've seen and if you've learned more about SIGA, and if you'd like to donate and help us champion sport integrity, you can do that via the app. There's a donate now button, and you can also learn more and go through to the donation page via the website as well, siga-sport.com. Thanks to all of you who have engaged as well using the hashtag SIGAWomen. We've been asking you over the course of the last 3 days for some of your female leaders in sport, maybe somebody that's personally helped you in your career, and loads of them have come through, and we've liked and engaged with them across Twitter and also Instagram as well. Lots of thank yous need to take place. I'll do them towards the end of the closing session, but before all of that, we're not done yet. We've got 3 more keynote speeches, and they're big ones as well. We'll be closing things up in about 20 minutes time with the chairman of SIGA, Franco Frattini. We'll be hearing from Gabriela Ramos in just a moment as well. She's the Assistant Director General for Social and Human Science at UNESCO. But before all that, let's kick off our closing session. And I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by Antonia Marie de Mayo, who is the Director of the United Nations Interregional Crime and Justice Research Institute, and she will begin with one of 3 closing keynote speeches. Antonia, it is over to you, and I must say I'm very, very jealous by that backdrop. Good evening to you.
Thank you so much, Ben, for that really warm opening. And the backdrop is actually Turin. That's the UNICRI office in Turin, Italy. So thank you so much for inviting me to this closing ceremony. I'm honored to represent UNICRI in this web summit on female leadership in sport. I would, of course, like to express my gratitude to the global CEO of SIGA, Emmanuel Macedo de Medeiros, and to Chairman Franco Frattini for this invitation. I would also like to sincerely thank the more than 80 speakers who have shared their experience and expertise with us over the past 3 days. Your contributions are both eye-opening and inspiring. The Global Integrity, the Sport Integrity Global Alliance represents a unique global forum to promote integrity in sport. And I take this opportunity to commend SIGA for its outstanding achievements, including their universal standards on good governance in sport, financial integrity in sport, and sports betting integrity. These universal standards represent key tools to drive meaningful change in sport governance and integrity. This web summit is also a fitting celebration of International Women's Day, which we celebrated just 2 days ago. The fact that 70 women leaders joined SIGA's call for action is a testament to the importance of this initiative, which focuses on women's leadership in sport. It's a unique gathering of key leaders, international organizations, government, business and civil society actors who have addressed the challenges and opportunities that impact women making their careers in sport as athletes, managers, or within the wider industry. This summit has been an opportunity to showcase sport through the experiences of women leading the way in the field. And during these unprecedented times, the COVID-19 pandemic is impacting all sectors of society, including sport. Unfortunately, recent research by the UK's Nottingham Trent University has shown that 80% of female athletes believe that the growth of women's sport during the pandemic has been hindered by inequalities compared with men's sport, effectively creating a gender play gap, as some of the speakers have highlighted. From football to rugby, men's sports have been prioritized and restarted earlier than women's sports. And it's not just at an elite level that we see these inequalities. Reports state that during the pandemic, women have had to shoulder increased child and family care responsibilities, which in turn have negatively affected their activity levels and access to sports. We have to plan for the present and prepare for the future to ensure that women can continue enjoying sport as the world recovers from the COVID-19 pandemic. This summit has given us hope that we can continue to advance, thanks to the efforts of the organizers and the inspiring experiences of the diverse leaders who have taken part. Through their voices, we have heard how sport can inspire great achievements and change lives. Sport not only promotes health and well-being, it is also a vehicle for dialogue, self-realization, and social cohesion. It's a powerful means to promote gender equality and empowerment of women and girls around the world. And this has been recognized by the United Nations in its 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, which acknowledges the central role of sport. Sport is an important enabler of sustainable development. Sport contributes to peace and development by promoting tolerance and respect. It contributes to the empowerment of women and youth, and it positively impacts health, education, and social cohesion. In short, sport positively contributes to all aspects of human development. In the daily work of the United Nations, we see that sport helps rebuild post-conflict societies, reunite divided communities, and assist people to recover from war-related trauma. Sport provides a platform for interaction with excluded or marginalized groups and serves as a bridge to mutual understanding, reconciliation, unity, equality, and a culture of peace. Please let me tell you a little bit about how UNICRI applies support as a tool to promote sustainable development. UNICRI, which I have the privilege to direct, is a research and training institute in the field of criminal justice and crime prevention, as well as human rights. Our work primarily focuses on the 16th Sustainable Development Goal, which promotes peaceful and inclusive societies for sustainable development, access to justice for all, and effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions at all levels. For us, sport is a means to promote civic engagement, physical and mental well-being, education, community development, and resilience, all of which are key factors to achieve justice and the rule of law, especially for women and youth. In 2002, almost 20 years ago, UNICRI launched a worldwide program on major events security to promote technical assistance to policymakers and practitioners planning security for major events. UNICRI has provided this technical assistance to more than 70 countries worldwide, supporting them in planning the security for Olympic Games, regional games, FIFA World Cups, and Champions League finals, as well as the world and regional championships of several sport disciplines. Together with NGOs and civil society, UNICRI has also organized sporting initiatives to prevent violent extremism and the spread of radicalization in the Sahel and Maghreb regions of North Africa, where the power of sport builds resilience and social cohesion. This is crucially important work for women, given that women are often disproportionately affected by the spread of radicalization, and the erosion of women's rights serve as an important marker of growing extremism. On the individual level, we know that sports figures are incredibly powerful voices to advocate for peace and act as messengers of change across the world. Take the example of trailblazing four-time tennis Grand Slam winner Naomi Osaka, who last year chose to miss a crucial tennis match to attend Black Lives Matter protests in the United States. The next time she played on court, she used the opportunity to raise awareness, sporting face masks with the names of victims of racial injustice. Through our partnership with the United Nations Office on Counterterrorism, on the global program on security of major sporting events and promotion of sport and its values as a tool to promote violent extremism, we've met other sports figures making a difference in their countries. For example, Suad Gallo, who participated in one of our events, is a superstar in Somalia. She uses sport to change lives at a grassroots level. She's the founder and president of the Somali Women's Foundation and chairperson of the Somali Basketball Foundation. She shared how playing basketball gave her opportunity to travel and experience diversity. She was shocked when she saw the impact extremist groups were having on women and girls in Somalia, who were frequently subjected to assault, harassment, rape, and threats against their families and themselves. Believing that women are the key to peace in Somalia, she used her Somali Women's Foundation to create a tournament to focus attention on Somali women, helping women and girls to attend school, practice sport, and ultimately empower them for the future. Her goal is the empowerment of girls through sport, education, and peace. Today, more than ever, we should each use our voices and our platforms to proclaim loudly the values of sport, especially for young women who are missing opportunities to express themselves through sport, whether due to the pandemic or other inequalities and disparities. Highlighting women's leadership in sport is an excellent place to start. This has been a historic year of results and breaking barriers for women. Sarah Thomas was the first woman to officiate the Super Bowl. 2 women referees, Natalie Sago and Jenna Schrader, officiated an NBA basketball game together for the first time, and Jenna Schrader said it made her feminist dreams come true, uniting her personal and professional values. The Tokyo Olympics is expected to have almost equal representation of women and men competing for the first time in history. In addition, the Tokyo Olympics recently appointed 12 women to its executive board, which will now have 19 women among 45 members, or 42%. Seiko Hashimoto, the new president of the organizing committee and a former Olympic bronze medal winner in speed skating, celebrated this progress. She said, to achieve gender equality, we believe it is necessary to work with speed, and results must be our guide. Yes, I think we can all agree with her. Speed and results must be our guide as we strive to achieve gender equality in and through sport. The important representation role these women and all who've contributed to this Web Summit play in sports and beyond cannot be overstated. Our daughters and girls around the world are watching. When they see women breaking barriers in all sectors and all aspects of life, they can see themselves in new roles and their opportunities expand, their dreams expand. The impossible becomes possible because they can see someone like themselves achieving what they hope to achieve. The testimonies shared in this Web Summit resonate globally. They inspire us to strengthen our commitment to achieving gender equality and a better world through the unique power of sport. Thank you very much for your kind attention, and I'm honored to be part of this closing ceremony. Thank you.
Antonia, thank you very much indeed. Really pertinent and empowering words there. And please do keep up all of the good work that you do as well. Thank you for giving us the opening keynote of our closing session. And that will also be available on YouTube and social media in due course as well. Antonia Marie de Mayo, their Director of the United Nations Interregional Crime and Justice Research Institute. Let's move on then to our second keynote of 3. As I said earlier, we've got Franco Frattini still to come, the chairman of SIGA, and then we'll close things off. And whilst these keynotes are going on, I have to tell you that I'm furiously texting away to SIGA organizers to see if I can twist their arm to confirming we'll be doing this again, same time next year, again to mark International Women's Day. Hopefully it will be even bigger. You never know, they might even be persuaded to do an entire week on female leadership in sport. More to come though, and follow us for announcements across social media as well. Let's move on, as I say though, to our second keynote speech now in this closing session. I'm delighted to welcome the Assistant Director General for Social and Human Science at UNESCO. It's a very good evening to Gabriela Ramos. Gabriela, thanks for joining us. It's over to you.
Thank you so much, Ben, and what a wonderful and inspiring speech by Antonia. I could almost say ditto on all the very important messages that she sent. But it's a pleasure to be closing this Global Web Summit on Women Leadership in Sports. And I really want to thank SIGA for having invited UNESCO to be here with you. Thank you, Franco. Thank you, Emmanuel. And what can I say? You have said it all in terms of the very interesting debates and very interesting participants. What is really encouraging is that you have so many institutions in this summit, so many people, so many individuals that are gathered to really ensure that the sports plays the key role to build more sustainable and more human development. And I think this is the main message that we can extract from these conversations on the fact that sports is good, we know, sports is good. And if you're a sports person, you know that this is excellent for your physical and mental health. This is really something that we come to realize when we are confronting the COVID pandemic. We know how much comorbidities and the health status had something to say about the pandemic. We know how much, if you are in good shape, you can cope much better whenever the downsides of this terrible time for humanity is getting us to address. So the fact is that sports are the answer to so many questions. At UNESCO, we believe in sports as a conveyor for peace, as a conveyor for development, as a conveyor of values. And that's why, as an institution that is in charge of the education agenda, we put sports as a very important lever to advance the SDG goals and to advance what United Nations stands for. But the reality is that not everybody enjoys sports. And I'm very pleased to see that you are focusing on women, because as we know, in all of the areas of our economy, in all of our areas of our societies, women is always experiencing gaps in many of their experiences and in the way that they can address and fulfill their whole potential in their lives. In terms of the sports, we know that women can represent and can achieve many of the very many goals that are provided for them in these platforms, but the reality is that they are always lagging behind. Whereas 44% of men practice sports at least once a week, only 36% of women do so. When you look at those who play sport regularly, the gap is even wider. 12% of young men compared to 6% of young women engage in sport or in another physical activity at least 5 times per week. And we know what does this mean. It's already very low for everybody. And I would say that the main message is to encourage everybody to engage in sports activities. But if you only have 6% of girls that engage in physical activity on a regular basis, this is really too low. Because what is happening is that they are not only enjoying the benefits of practicing sports in terms of health, mental and physical, but it's also preventing them from achieving this sense of fulfillment and this sense of understanding that we have the power to achieve whatever we want to achieve through the practice of sports. And so this is something that we need to redress, and this is something that we need to address. Likewise, when you go into the employment field for the sports activities, men get 55% of the jobs, but in sports-related occupation in the sector itself, such as professional athletes or professional coaches, as well as outside of the sports section, for example, as school sports instructors. No sports occupation in the sports sector shows similar finding, for example, receptionists in fitness center. So again, the kind of distribution that we see in terms of activities is really skewed. Voluntary work that supports sporting activities reflect the imbalance too. And we know also that it's not the question only of practices, it's the question of the institutions that gather together to organize the sports world, the sexism that we sometimes perceive in this institution, and the hierarchies that, again, like in many other fields of our life, prevent women to achieve the management position. The Olympic organizations, the European institutions, the institutions on many of the countries, where we see the very similar pattern that we see in other business world, in which women at most will achieve 10, 20, or 30% of managerial experiences or roles, and where we really need to push it forward, because this will bring diversity, but also it will bring the perspective of women to this very important agenda. And then we have the media, and this is something that I'm sure you discuss at length, and we are always puzzled by the fact that media covers sports where women participate far less than what they do for men. Only a tiny bit, 6% of total sports media coverage is dedicated to sports related to women. And then you have this argument that we should really push back, that they don't dedicate more time for women's sports because nobody watches them. Well, nobody will watch them if you don't dedicate time to it. So I think it's very important that we continue disentangled and we continue pushing down all these barriers that are really preventing women to fulfill their full potential in the sports world. But as Antonia said, and as many of the speakers in the summit said, times are changing. I think that institutions are realizing this. The fact that Japan took this very brave decision to change the head of the organizing committee because of a sexist comment is really the changing times. And then we have this wonderful woman in charge of the whole event management. The reality is that we see that the mindsets and the way in which we address these issues is starting to move. Of course, the summit is providing us with a fantastic opportunity to magnify these voices, to magnify the message, and to magnify the fact that in the sports world, if we ensure equality and if we ensure that women are treated with respect, this will deliver better for the sports sectors, but it will deliver better for the world and for many other areas. I want to just share with you that at UNESCO, we are convinced about these issues. UNESCO is the international institutions and the United Nations system that is hosting the convention, anti-doping convention, to ensure integrity in the sports world. We are also hosting the MINEPS, which is the ministerial meeting of Ministers of Sports of the whole world too. And we're also addressing very specifically several aspects on how to advance the practicing of sports in a very qualitative and quantitative way. First, we're launching the Fit for Life initiative that I would love to share with you whenever we have it ready, but this is the response to the COVID problems to ensure that institutions and governments make sport part of the recovery packages. We need to do that because sports is nowhere to be seen in the COVID pandemic crisis, and particularly the economic crisis that followed the health crisis. What we see is that the governments are putting a lot of effort, financial effort, to keep the economy going. They are putting a lot of effort to keep the industries that are shut down completely, like the air industry or tourism or cultural activities. But we don't see the same kind of reflex regarding the sports. And the sports sectors is really badly affected by the COVID pandemic, and they need support. But more than anything, we also need to think about sports as a tool to recover and as a tool to really build back better, because we have all really show the impact and the benefits that sports provide for people and for our kids and for youngsters that need to practice much more sports. This is a very strong call that we are doing at UNESCO. We will be delivering also the quality physical education. Our schools are very good at providing some time for doing sports, but not at investing at the quality in terms of how do we teach sports, how do we use sports as conveyor of values. We know what it means to be in a team. We know what it means to be respectful of diversity. We know what it means to win the battle because of merit and because of effort. And all these messages that are so needed in the world today, we need to push it forward with quality physical education, and not only by physical education as we know it. So the Fit for Life and the quality physical education are two very important contributions that UNESCO is doing to this debate. And we will also add up that these instruments are going to have a gender angle very well centered in terms of their development and their implementation. And to do that, we're also launching the Observatory of Gender in Sports with the support of the Swiss government to really bring all this data that I share with you, and that I'm sure many of the panelists of this summit also share with you, to try to first put the picture, realize what is wrong in the world of sports for women and for girls, and then try to advance very effective solutions, the best practices that we identified in many countries and in many institutions, the lessons that we've heard in so many panels in this summit and in the SIGA work that is really pushing for an agenda of change. And then we will put it to advance a discussion and to advance a real understanding of how important are these agendas for the world to advance not only equality, but also sustainability and development. I'm very pleased to have joined you today. I invite you to continue working with UNESCO in this field, and we will be very happy to learn from the outcomes of the summit and for the impact that these outcomes will have for women, for girls, and for sports. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gabriela. Well said, and a particularly important point raised there about governments not forgetting sport within their COVID recovery plan. That keynote speech will also be available on YouTube and social media as well. Gabriela, really appreciate your support and enjoy the rest of your week. Hopefully we can involve Gabriela in the next SIGA event. And speaking of next SIGA events, please stay tuned to social media and our website as well, because we've got a full plan for the year ahead. So earlier I mentioned that we're hoping to go bigger and better next International Women's Day, but there's plenty more to come as well in 2021. And if you'd like to donate to SIGA's cause, championing sport integrity, you can do that via the app or the website as well. And not only will we be using that money broadly on a variety of different projects that we actually, at our last event, the SIGA Youth Forum, surveyed in order to find out where you wanted money allocated, but more specifically and relevant to this particular Web Summit, we'll be putting some of our investment towards mentoring young female leaders. And at noon every day, we've had behind closed doors workshops. We had one on leadership today and abuse and sexual discrimination yesterday. And that again shows how SIGA are connecting mentors and mentees in order to promote not just female talent, but obviously female talent in the context of this particular summit. And the SIGA Youth Forum as well runs throughout the course of the year too. More details are available on our website. Let's move on then to our third and final keynote speech in this closing session. And who better to round things off than SIGA's very own chairman? Let's hand over now to Franco Frattini.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is a great pleasure as a chairman of SIGA to address to you, first of all, to the women, to repeat once again how much the topic of women's role and empowerment of women is close to my heart. It has been so in my different capacities as Italian Foreign Minister, as well as Vice President of European Commission, where I launched the first ever European Agency for Fundamental Rights, having among its core business topics exactly the role of women, protection of women from violence, and the key principle, which is in all the constitutions of developed state, of gender parity. This is a principle which is even more important in the field of sport. Sport activities are, I would say, the pure expression of the supreme values of the Olympic Charter. And in the Olympic Charter is said, the winner has to win. Those performing better have to win. So the principle is fair competition. Fair competition means equal opportunities. Equal opportunities means opening the way by removing all the obstacles before the women to, I would say, not only practice sport, but living in an environment which is not hostile, is not source of abuses, source of sexual harassment, and so on and so forth. Unfortunately, we learned about so many cases where in the field of sport, women are victims instead of being protagonists. But it's not only a problem of protecting women. The problem is to guarantee equality and to guarantee justice. This is behind the role of women and the empowerment of women in the field of sport. And of course, one thing we have to consider is that there are very, very few women bearing important responsibilities within sport organizations, sport federations, as it should be. I take an example from my country, Italy. There has been never a woman president of Italian Sport Federation. In no sports federation, never. That's, frankly speaking, simply unacceptable. We have a huge number of federations, each for every sport, and no women, never, neither now nor in the past, have been the president of a federation. This is, frankly speaking, something, and I wanted to take by example, by a negative example, my country, to say that gender balance and offering equal opportunities to women is and should be one of the key goals for SIGA. SIGA is pursuing integrity. Integrity means justice and equality. Is a declination of the general principle of integrity. Not only, of course, removing the pathologies of abuses, the pathologies of exploitation of the women athletes, but also in a positive way, how to empower in a better way the women in the field of sport. This is why I wanted to propose, together with my colleague and dear friend Emmanuel Medeiros, that in the next assembly of SIGA, in the next council election, there will be an election of the members of SIGA Council and the General Assembly between now and spring, between April and May. I made a proposal, the constitution of SIGA, the statute, be modified by affirming the principle of gender equality in all the SIGA organs. All the SIGA organs. We do have valid women. We do have performing women as managers, as athletes, as expert advisors that can contribute much more than now to the SIGA activities. We want to be seen and we want to be taken by example in this field. It's not because they are women, but because they are good, because they do perfectly what they do as an athlete, as a manager, as I said. So it's also a principle where we cannot hide the value, the added value of women in the field of sport. Not only in the field of sport, I've been working in diplomacy by empowering women in diplomacy. I appointed the first ever Director General at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Italy. Before that appointment, there had been never women as a Director General or ambassadors in the network of Italian diplomacy. It happened not a century ago. It happened just 15 years ago. But just to say, in the field of sport, we have very much to do. This is our commitment. This is our sincere commitment. I make an appeal to all of you, the women that are already contributing hugely to the activities of the standing committees of SIGA, to the activities of the Council, to the activities of US SIGA, and they will be working in the SIGA Europe, and so on and so forth. We have already a huge, important group of women that are working with us within SIGA by pursuing the SIGA goals. I make an appeal to the others, to those women that are not yet involved in SIGA. Be active, be proactive. Let's propose a good candidature. Let's propose your position to be taken into consideration, and we will do, myself, Emmanuel Medeiros will do, within the activities of the incoming assembly, of the incoming elections of the council, we will take into consideration in full. A final point, I'm sure that without repeating a slogan, the world will be richer if the women will be more active and more participating in all the activities, regardless their role. We need women, we need their cooperation, we need such as continuous important exchange between men and women. The sport can be taken as the exemplar sector where we go more in advance than in politics, than in the normal institutions. In sport, why not? The athletes are always in principle ahead. Why not for the women? This is the wish. This is my hope. I'm certainly sure that will happen soon, starting from incoming April and May appointment and institutional assembly and council election. SIGA wants to be a champion also on the role of women. Thank you very much.
Franco, thank you very much indeed. Certainly the best possible way to end. SIGA wants to be a champion for female leaders and, of course, integrity within sport, female sport specifically in this context. And if you want to support us on that mission on a small level or a grand scale mission, you can do a number of things. One is make a small donation, and that can be done via the app or the website. Two is make a large donation, even better if you have the financial means. And three is get in contact with us if potentially you are a partner that is looking to engage and potentially sponsor or work with us on an event, or maybe you're an individual and you're looking to either be a mentor or a mentee. And all again you have to do is reach out to someone like Franco, Emmanuel, Katie, Ian, and then they will connect you with the right people and loop you in to help us champion female leadership and integrity at large. But that is it for now. We've had a fascinating 3 days, and I must point out, if you've missed anything, they'll all be available on YouTube. You can follow us as well on social media, on Twitter and on Instagram, and the handle is SIG Alliance. So please do so, and let's keep the conversation going, because the whole point of this event is that we weren't just going to do something because it was International Women's Day, which was Monday when this conference kicked off. We have done a 3-day event packed with content. And the reason for that is because International Women's Day should not just be a one-off. The conversation around female leadership and championing young leaders and giving those who are more established opportunities in boardrooms and making sure that we have gender parity around the boardrooms and also within government and so on is vital. And that conversation and that work is being done 365 days a year by everybody connected with SIGA. And that's why, to show you that, we've gone well beyond International Women's Day and will continue to do so throughout the rest of the year and beyond. So thank you very much indeed for listening and engaging. I particularly want to thank those involved behind the scenes in this conference who have worked tirelessly, not just over the last 3 days, but of course in the build-up as well. So heartfelt thanks to Emmanuel, of course, and Franco, to Katie, to Ian, to Larry, to Dave, to Sean, to Craig, and all of the production crew at Italy TV, to Andalea, who's helped out heroically with social media, Instagram in particular, and of course to all of our speakers and moderators and supporters and viewers. And a special thanks to give everyone behind the scenes a good laugh to Angela Lachica's cat, who actually made a cameo live in one of the panels, and we've been putting up a photograph of that throughout the course of the conference because it certainly made us giggle on a slightly lighter note. So please do keep supporting SIGA. We've got loads more to come this year and beyond, but for now, thanks once again for tuning in to our web summit on female leadership in sport. From myself, Ben Jacobs, it is good night, and we'll play out with the highlights from the week.
I think quite often it's the real challenge when you're talking about getting more women involved in sports participation is that there are so many things that people just don't seem to want to talk about. And getting people to start sitting down in a room and addressing those barriers is vital.
It's not really about an age thing, because I think leadership is not defined by age. It's about what stage you're in your career, where's your self-belief, where are your skill set, and where's your aspirations.
For players, their primary focus is to play, and to risk or jeopardize the potential of that possibility is a really tough thing.
As a player, of course I will say, oh, we need to play. We need to play, we want to play, the other teams are playing.
The world was built for men, and now we have to rebuild it to include women.
You know, I would just encourage any woman listening, like, don't let this get in your way of building your own company or going hard after the sports technology space.
Because it is very important to be visible, because if you can't see it, you can't be it.